All right, here we go. Kind of feel like I'm in one of those confessionals in church. Forgive me for it has been 4 weeks since my last recording. And in that recording, I believe I said I was going to do this every week. So, shame on me. I actually think what would be best is if I tried to capture something every 2 days. Because so much comes into my mind, usually not just endemically, but from an outside catalyst, something I've been listening to or reading. And I was like, this is great, something I should share. And then invariably, I come up with some sort of excuse to bypass recording. So, full intention to try to get everything out there in this one, and that way, when something small pops up, then I can just record that hopefully in a 2 to 3 minute blurb. Okay, I'm telling you as much as I'm telling myself. So the last 4 weeks, much has happened. Try to hit on the major elements, which will lead to the lesson, I guess we could call that, in this video. Something that I did with my mentor when I was working with him a year or two ago was that we would start with wins. Things that were positive that have happened over at that time the last week. So I'll start with my wins. Joel and I filmed, and he's actually even posted, that's how long it's been, our first real podcast. It's up on YouTube. It's technically episode 7, but we went up to Andalusia and met with Mark Haynes, who's a mushroom expert, forestry expert. He's the first guy in recorded history that walked the entire U.S.-Mexico border. So we got to hang out with him, which was awesome. Joel did a hell of a job with that video. I encourage you to go check that out. In fact, one of my big goals is to really push forward on the podcast side of things, because it's definitely more of a creative outlet than all the other kind of production stuff that I seem to get wrapped up in doing. So that's a huge win. The other big thing is a new resource that I've been turned on to by way of another podcast called the Survivalist Podcast, TSP. It's hosted by Jack Spirko. This is, without a doubt, one of the most informative, forward-thinking, open-minded thinking, kind of monologue-based podcasts that I've ever been exposed to. So this is for anyone that thinks they might want to learn more about survival, in the sense of he's gonna teach you how to become more self-dependent or independent relative to the state and to everything else. So there's a lot of libertarianism in there, which is a cornerstone of my political ethos for sure, and certainly that's at the heart of what Caveman is really all about. And I found him just as he was going on his vacation, which meant he was doing a rewind series related to, he called it the Insurrection series, which is different from Revolution. Revolution is where you change who's in charge, but nothing really happens. And Insurrection is when you take power back for yourself. And I would say, go start that. It's about a 12 or 13 day series. Each one's like an hour long. And a lot of the things that he talks on in the beginning is how to motivate you in this short series. To really kind of kick your own ass and get back into your own life. But every time he's talking, it's like, oh shit, that's something I can share. So those two are really big wins. All right. To get to today's lesson, I think it was probably already 4 weeks ago, got into it on Facebook. I kind of post on my personal page, little quips, little thoughts for people to consider all this nonsense that's been transpiring the last few months. Anyway, long story short, got attacked in the social media sense. It was called the racist, which was really befuddling more than anything else. It's one of those things where you're like, yeah, that happens to other people. And then someone does it to you and you're like, this is just strange, very strange. And it certainly epitomizes all the malarkey that's going on out there in terms of how I view what's really transpiring and who's kind of hijacking the general populace's emotions in order to direct something in what I would view as the opposite of where they think they're really going. Anyway, the point isn't really the content of that context. It is more what I learned from that. So it kind of stuck in my head. So I had that personal attack, which was strange. And then I had another really weird one through a text, which is a whole nother story, and things come in threes. And the third one was part one of my COVID series got pulled from YouTube. I think I had like 144 views. So I was kind of honored for that one, even though it was all kind of ridiculous. All right. So that's kind of stuck in my head, and I've been talking to other people, and they'd show up, and they're like, these things are happening on social media, yada, yada, and I can't help but be bothered by it. All right, so the lesson is, first, despite the fact that we think we're logical creatures, we are emotional before we're logical, and we're seeing a lot of this play out, especially in social media, after we've been wound up so much, being locked down, not able to express ourselves physically in an interpersonal way. So people are kind of like pent up, and we're seeing the rage happen. But I have been reading a lot. These last 4 months have been just doors opening in terms of new information I've been reading. But one of the short books that I've been into, and I just finally finished it, was the Bhagavad Gita. And of course, there's parallels between that and the Bible and the Tao Te Ching and all those other spiritual texts. But one of the things that keeps popping up is non-attachment. And I would even relate this to the idea of the death of the ego. So if in any situation, when your emotions take hold, which is going to be almost all the time when something happens out of nowhere or something that you're not planning on, you feel yourself pulled towards that reaction. Of course, we want to respond, not react. A response is a little more stepping back and evaluating what is happening, and a reaction, of course, is very knee-jerk, and you're going to kind of be reacting from your fight or flight or something of that nature. So if you can almost remove yourself objectively from the situation and ascribe to this idea of non-attachment, therefore you are not attached to the outcome of this or your emotions that you think would dictate the situation, then you can just view things as a passive observer instead of getting yourself embroiled in it. I mean, no doubt you are entitled to your emotion for anything that transpires. However, if your emotion is not leading you to some sort of resolution, if it's not helping the situation, then as quickly as possible, you need to alleviate that. There's probably a negative emotion that we're talking about. If it's positive, then this really isn't an issue. Establish that non-attachment, remove your ego from the situation, and then it won't bother you. Obviously, it's way easier said than done, but it is something I believe at the core of any enlightenment or, path to self-actualization or just getting through your goddamn day, day in and day out, is not becoming so riled up by all that. All right, so non-attachment, death of the ego, something that Spirko talked about. Again, go back and just start listening to his podcast. He referenced, and I forget the guy that originated it, the 3 circles. So you have your circle of concern, your circle of influence, and your circle of control. And you need to constantly check yourself to see what circle you're hanging out in. And invariably, when you're in your circle of concern, these are things that are bothering you, but you have no influence or control over, so why are you wasting your time there? And that's what social media does. It's a suck of your energy. It's an energy drain, typically just poking you and prodding you back into your circle of concern instead of keeping you focused on your circle of control, right? You don't have any control over who's going to win the election, so stop worrying about all the fucking nonsense that the president's talking about, or the people that like him are talking about, or the people that don't like the people that like him are talking about. It's just going to infuriate you one way or the other. So there's your circle of concern versus circle of control. Go plant a freaking garden or do something that will be self-fulfilling and something that you have control in. All right, that obviously could be summed up with get the heck off of social media unless you're deriving objectively more gain than loss from that, which I really think most people are not. And I really try to stay off of that and turn off the gosh darn news. It is only going to lead you astray, and it's not going to provide you with anything fulfilling or redeeming or informing beyond some sort of entertainment if you can watch it passively like that. All right, so go watch the podcast. Start to practice non-attachment. Check out the Survivalist Podcast with Jack Spirko. And in about 10 days, Joel, who's the media guy that helps me make my videos, Losin Media, we are flying up to my parents' house in Montana, and we're going to road trip our way back. Going to get a lot of good content, a lot of outdoor stuff, a lot of caveman stuff, a lot of trog stuff. Really looking forward to that. A lot of work to be done between now and then, and I hope to see you on the other side. Cheers.